I don't know whether you realise, but life is full of ups and downs. I know I've certainly experienced that. And oftentimes within those ups and downs, it's easy to ask the question, why? Why is God letting this happen to me? And I think, unfortunately, the reality is we often don't get the answer to that. In fact, I don't think that we ever will get the answer to that. But one thing that I have found encouraging as I've reflected on my life is about one word, and that's perspective. And once I get perspective, then those ups and downs become a little bit easier to work with. A number of years ago, about 30 plus years ago actually now, my mum passed away with brain cancer, and 6 months later my wife was killed in a car accident. Now for me that was a massive down, and that was a real struggle. But I've also had lots of ups as well. I've had lots of positive stuff. So mixed in with failures and with study or work or ministry or whatever, I've also had incredible successes as well. I can actually relate to Paul. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 1:8, "We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about the troubles we faced in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of even life itself. Indeed, we felt we had received the sentence of death." That's pretty significant stuff. I don't know whether you've ever felt like that. As I said, I've had experiences when I've felt like that, not for the sake of the gospel, but just because of life circumstances. But even though all of these things that happen to us, whether the significant ups or the significant downs, perspective is important. Perspective is important. When I hit my 50s, I had a midlife crisis. I didn't go out and buy a fast car or red sports car, much to Rhonda's dismay. But instead I actually picked up pastels, painting with pastels. Now I'm not particularly good at them, but I picked them up as something that I did when I was a little kid. And I thought, no, let's give it a whirl. So I did. And so I painted pastels. And as I was going through that after a couple of years, I thought, you know what, it'd be quite interesting to reflect on my life and see if I could paint a pastel about that. But what would I do? Well, when I first came to Australia from the UK in the 70s, I was, and I have to be honest, I was influenced by Skippy the bush kangaroo. I was quite impressed that a kangaroo was able to not only operate a ham radio, but could fly a plane and operate a four-wheel drive at the same time, plus call for assistance. And so I wanted to meet this kangaroo. And so when I came over to Australia, I just fell in love with the Australian bush, the Australian bush life, and all that the Australian nature had. I just felt a real affinity for it. And so to me, when I was painting a pastel, I thought, you know what, this is something which is going to fit in very well with my feeling of the bush. So that's what I did. But then how do you start? I mean, where do you start? Do you copy a picture from somewhere, or do you do that? And I thought, no, let's start from scratch. Let's think about my life and let's have a look at different things that have happened in my life and how that relates to different aspects in the bush. I saw a burnt out tree one time. I'd been hit by lightning or by a bushfire, I don't know, but it had blown out, and so it was all blackened and little bits of leaves on the top there. And I thought, that actually, I can relate to that sometimes in my life. I also love to see the ominous clouds coming over the horizon, bringing with them rain and incredible weather conditions. And I thought, yeah, that also I can relate to that as well with some of the stuff that I see. But I also love the gentle rolling hills. When I was a geologist, I used to do a lot of field work and walk over a lot of hills. And so I loved an appreciation of just those rolling hills and just the peace, and as you could feel the gentle breeze or the heat or the flies or whatever it was, just walking over those. And I just love that. And so I thought, yep, these and a whole raft of other things I want to include in this picture because they relate to things that I have experienced in my life. But it was interesting as I started to reflect on those and as I started to think about that, I realised that they were not just simply one-dimensional, but the tree that had been blown out by lightning actually provided a shelter for animals. It actually had new life and new growth. And so this tree which seemed dead was actually really very alive, but its function had changed. Those ominous clouds which were in the distance, which seemed to be threatening, actually brought life-giving rain to the whole environment around about, which the bush needed to survive. But also those rolling hills, which I felt so at peace at and loved, were also covered by shrubby scrub, which had prickles and thorns. As I reflected on all that sort of stuff, that term, perspective, came back to me. You see, each one of the elements of that, when they were all combined together, formed an interesting picture. And it formed a picture such that not one of those elements could be missing, but all those elements were needed. All of those challenges, the good stuff and the bad stuff, all came together in this picture, this vista. As Paul says in 2 Corinthians 1, 9-11, he carries on the same passage. He says, "But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. He has delivered us from such a deadly peril, and he will deliver us again. On him we have set our hope that he will continue to deliver us as you help us by your prayers. Then many will give thanks on our behalf for the gracious favour granted us in answer to the prayers of many." I like what Paul says there, because what he does is he pulls in not only the impact of God and his encouragement within them so that they actually experience the provision of God within their situation, but he also, in terms of developing their faith, but he also pulled in the impact and the prayers of others within the midst of that, and the impact of their situation upon other people. Isaiah 55, 8-9 is a well-known verse for many of us, and I think highlights some of this, but from a different perspective. God's speaking to the people of Israel, and he says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." An important and sobering thought as we reflect on this concept of perspective. And again, Paul continues on in 1 Corinthians 13, verses 10-13. He makes the comment, he says, "I only see dimly now, but then I see more fully. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we see only a reflection in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know more fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love." Perspective in our lives is critical. It helps us to get right priorities. It helps us to get a right perspective. Perspective is about creating vision. Perspective is about understanding God's vision for us. It's about understanding the bigger picture for us. And so no matter what we're going through, we can come back to that verse 13, which says, "The greatest of these is love," and that God, in fact, his love for us is so great that those individual components all come together in an incredible masterpiece that God is creating in our lives. In this world, we may not see, we may not understand what God is really doing, but when we go to be with him, we will understand more fully. So let's take that promise of encouragement. Let's take that promise of perspective. Let's take that promise of the love of God that comes into our hearts, into our lives, that helps to guide and to lead us. Let's take that run with it, and allow it to impact us and to change our lives, so that tomorrow we will be closer to God and a better follower of Jesus. God bless.